Hello, I'm User-Friendly's assistant. Because this is too complicated for User-Friendly, and this is less of a sort of fun artistic video and more of an actual demonstration. This down here is a Max for Live device I've been working on basically since the gamepad object came out. And it's available on my Patreon. It's basically just like expression control or the LFO. You just click these map buttons and, map them to whatever you want. So it's very straightforward to use by itself, but quite a few different people ask how I go about actually patching with it. I don't really have any particular trick, but there are a few things that I do that seem to kind of work. But for the most part, it's just trial and error. I tend to either start literally with just a kick and a snare, or something a bit more experimental that I can then sort of, build some sort of beat around outside of that. The touchpad does work. You can see that little thing orb moving around in there, but you have to have the cable attached. I don't have the gyroscope info in there yet. The amount of control that's here already, it can be kind of overwhelming. I rarely end up using everything. A quick overview, you have the actual, trigger, so you can slowly sort of squeeze that. You have the bumpers, the D-pads, touchpad, there's a gate for it. These other triggers over here, triggers on the joysticks for X and Y. At the bottom, these are also for the D-pad, but they're toggles. So only one will be on at a time. And then this little drop-down menu is for travel or recenter. So if you have travel on, basically the number will increase or decrease and then stay there. So think of like scanning through a granulator or something like that. I think the best way to do this is probably drum rack. It's just not usually how I go about it. First, I'll just do a kick drum. So right off the bat, I'll group it. All of these buttons, even the triggers, they're all going to send out a MIDI note. It starts at C1, so that way if you wanted to, you could just drop a drum rack in and everything would be right where you'd want it. It would start with the square button and then you could go from there. I'll just show you. See, there's the C1 and then all the rest go up from there. So to just get the kick drum on the square, I'll use key, this little button here, and this is available after you group the instrument. So now just C1 is going to trigger the kick. And then same thing for the snare. We'll just move it up. I generally will group this again and add 64 different kicks. And then I'll just slice it by 64. So now it's all these different kicks to choose from. And then I'll add a pitch to offset it. And get it like right in the middle somewhere. And then a random. Put that at 100. Choices at 24 and bidirectional. Or whatever bi stands for. So now we have all of the kicks. So you'll just get a random kick in there somewhere. We'll probably end up side chaining this. So I'm gonna make sure that there's not too much crazy decay. One of the interesting things about side chaining with a bunch of different kicks like this, and also just compression in general, is since you have, these are all relatively the same, but you have different decay and transient and stuff like that. So if you point the sidechain compressor at a bunch of different kicks like this, you'll actually get some variation from the sidechain. do the same thing with the snare. 64 snares here. Copy. And put that there. I guess while we're at it, we'll do the hat real quick. And for that, I'll do, and then I have somewhere in here just a bunch of different I'm gonna add a drum bus because I add it to everything. Alright, so I find one of the fun ways to sort of set this up is in such a way that you're gonna sort of have to use the controller to look around for things, if that makes sense. So we'll do another instrument, and I guess just operator is as good as anything. Alright, so that's on this actual trigger here. I'm going to do an arpeggiator and then map this to macro 1. These buttons can only be mapped to one parameter. So if you went directly from this map button to the rate, that's all it would control. At least for me, intuitively, I would think the harder I squeeze, the faster it would move, not the slower. So I'll switch that. The only thing you have to be careful about with using these is how is it gonna interact when if you decide later on to assign other controls to this macro, you know, how will that scaling be correct for whatever that parameter is, if that makes sense. So, and the other thing about that is if you do, say I don't want it to go to 10 milliseconds and using just this scale to sort of change that, that's now going to affect this macro knob across the board. So anything else you assign to it will also be sort of offset or attenuated. So I try to do that generally in the map, this little button here. The next thing is the decay. It would seem to me that the faster it goes, it should have a shorter decay and vice versa. So I'll just map that to the same trigger. Again, it's a bit much, so come into map. We'll map this to the macro and this, and then do them opposite. So this one turns up, that one turns down. We'll do roar. And by the way, this Max for Live device, this will work with Ableton 11. There's just something in the settings that you'll need to possibly check, but otherwise it should work with 11. So this we'll do to one of the joysticks, and multi-band seems interesting, I guess. We'll do 2, 3, and actually this one we'll do on the trigger as well. Up this joystick here. So for example, with the travel, if I have that set to travel, now when I move the joystick, those knobs will travel to I don't actually use it that much, and the reason is because the more you are, as you get your patch set up, you'll find sweet spots that sound really cool or work. So you'll almost sort of use the joystick to try and hold it right there. But because you can't stay perfectly still, you'll get those little fluctuations. So that little bit of variation will actually add a lot. The other thing is, it almost sort of starts to help form some sort of idea in your head. So you can be, doing all the sort of crazy thing, whatever, and then you're ready to go back to some particular spot. You can be like, oh, that's right. Down and to the left is that cool spot. Which in this case it's not, but you get the idea. I think it should be sidechain. Compressor, and we'll do both the kick and the snare, so we'll group those again. Still too much. So I'm just gonna do another roar. If you just, as one thing gets louder, you'll just turn up another thing even louder. And then if that one's too loud, go back and turn the other one up, and just sort of continuously do that until this little, basically once this little line here is no longer moving, it should sort of work. I guess the next thing would be we could do some overall effects. So like a last thing before, so something we'll send everything through. So we're going to group and then duplicate, delete. This is going to be our dry signal. This will be the wet. And shifter, delay. Actually, maybe we'll just leave it like this. And the last one will be dry. Yeah. One thing about this is I would like to continue to keep all of the macros at the beginning of this, so I can just sort of easily go over and map them. So I'm going to group this again. Depending on how far you go with it, you may need to unmap these macros and remap them again to the next page. I'm not going to do that here. I just wanted to basically make it so I could map this stuff. So these are the mute buttons. And then we'll map that to 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are not mapped yet because what that mapped to is not this, it's this master macro. So you're sort of like levels and levels and levels. It does get a little confusing, but I enjoy it. So these are toggles. So whichever D-pad we hit is going to go on or off. So right now it's dry. I don't like the dry because I need that. Just do an overdrive like that. Unmap and delete. What we should have, we always have this dry channel here. Yeah. Now just go through and pick stuff to map. I wouldn't really worry about it too much. Chances are anything you map is going to be interesting once you get into the joysticks and stuff. So we'll do 5, 6. Maybe not this, just because you can sort of do the math. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Shift to maybe 7. That to 8. This might seem confusing, and it is, because I don't really like, it's almost like I don't want to know exactly what's what, because I'll get something weird and I'll be able to sort of like play it and figure out what happens, what works, what doesn't. That one I am going to scale because it can get out of control pretty quickly. I just want the sort of pitch shifting thing. Maybe that, and that. And then the same thing, map these to 5, 6, 7, 8. Something. I want a chord meld, I guess. Yeah, fine. And then maybe that and that and that and that. That's going to get boring. So do random. another reverb. And actually we'll do the same thing, we'll group that, duplicate it, delete that, so now we have a dry and a wet, and on this one we'll do another compressor, same thing, map that to the snare. Arpeggiator, expression control. Is it because scale isn't on? Is that why that's not working? Why does that just... Maybe it's these. Yeah, something like that. Fine, whatever. Now what? I suppose something you see I keep hitting these buttons. It's because I usually have some sort of other percussion element there that I'm sort of trying to add to it, but there's nothing there. So we'll just cheat. And do another sample chain of some type. Oh, look. Yeah, that'll be great. This one... Yes, sick drums. What effect is that? No. I need something on this. Perhaps this. Yeah, that makes more sense. There it is. let's do this. Beat repeat there. Chance at a 0. Insert. Yeah. And I think you have to press play for it to work, but map that to 10. I'm not sure if I want to do that button or this. Probably this button. Yeah. And then we have these two macros here, so while we're holding it down, we would want to move that stuff. So that's 2 and 3. Come all the way back over. And grid. I thought it was 2 and 3. Yeah, this is a perfect example of... So this group lives within this group. No, this group of macros. So I can't get into these. So I'm going to clear those out, map them to 11 and 12, and then remap this to here. Yeah. Now we can, or at least we should be able to. And I promise you I'm every bit as confused about this patch as you may be. 2, 3. That's too long. Beat, repeat, grid. 1 bar is too much. This is really, really good, the beat repeat sort of holding thing, because you can kind of see when, I mean, I'm struggling in general, but I'm struggling even more with the kick and snare, trying to do this other stuff, and then get my thumb up here to sort of switch the effects. So this little beat repeat thing is a perfect, you know, way to sort of... Because since this is static, as in it doesn't snap back anywhere, wherever you last touch it is where it's going to be. If you don't touch it for a little while and you're hitting these D-pad buttons and changing it around, it sounds like you're sort of going back to the same effect over and over again. So it's kind of like a way to just sort of switch things up a little bit. So you can hit that button. You can't hear anything happening, but you're changing the settings in the effects that you can then, you know. very, very, very addicting. Once everything is sort of starting to take on a life of its own, the patch will kind of stop being made because you'll just kind of get lost in this. Assuming you're into that sort of glitch experimental thing, you could probably actually do like actual music as in more traditional stuff with this. Like there's some really cool stuff you can do with chords and things like that. But this is more kind of glitch sort of thing. And you can see really I don't have that much mapped up yet. Like, for example, these buttons here, you could sort of do, oh, I'll just do it. No, I'm not going to do it because it could potentially get pretty involved. But like in theory, you could do an envelope somewhere tied to a reverb. So when you hit the effects, all the sound goes through like a huge reverb, but it's gated with an envelope or something. So you're just getting that sort of gated reverb sort of deal. But I think this is plenty long enough. So I'm going to stop here. This is essentially how I go about it, just grouping and trying things out and having fun. I'll put this patch on Patreon, and this is on Patreon, and yeah. Goodbye.